Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the New Mainstream Podcast,
where we explore the impact of multicultural consumers on marketing and media.
I'm your host, Mario Carrasco, and co-founder of Think Now. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the New Mainstream Podcast. I'm your host, Mario Carrasco, and today we are joined by Dan Comenduley, Senior Manager and Consumer Insight at UScellular. Dan, you have an extensive background in consumer insights, a passion for uncovering the future of consumer behaviors. Really appreciate you joining us today.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, so let's start with your career journey. This is really one of my favorite parts of the podcast. There's very few people that know right out of college or high school, like, hey, I want to get into market research. So, what was your journey like? How did you end up in the crazy world we call market research?
Well, I thought I wanted to be a programmer and had a job as a programmer. And the one thing that I learned was I didn't want to be a programmer. And, uh, but I was getting my MBA all along. So that was part of my plan. And when I looked at the parts of the job that I liked that I had and some of the things I learned, it was marketing that was most interesting to me. Uh, was trying to get into brand management, but didn't pan out for me that way, and I ended up going down the business analytics marketing research route instead. Started out at Philip Morris first as a consultant, then as employee, working on tobacco in North America. One of the most interesting things to be working on, and I know a lot of people may not think so, but a lot of things that we did at that time are things that really have fueled me towards thinking about what are some of the things that we need to do next? What are some of the things we need to really consider? Really opened my eyes to a wider possibility than I think could have happened in other places. Uh, was there for almost 4 years in total, and then moved on to Pillsbury in Minneapolis and worked on the Doughboy and cookies.
Iconic brand.
Yeah, it's and it was a lot of fun to work there too. But then I tried my hand at brand management briefly with Sara Lee and found that isn't what I wanted to do. Went back to doing more of the consumer insights, a little bit less of the business analytics. Went to Discover Card, and since then have been a few other places as well. United Airlines being my longest stint after that, and then also worked at AbbVie briefly. Worked also with Quill.com, which is part of Staples, and Synchrony, which is credit cards. And then now here I am at US Cellular working on cellular phone business.
That's cool. I love that you've worked some of the biggest iconic brands, different verticals, right? I mean, I think lots of consumer insights people I talk to, they're usually CPG or financial. I'm curious, how has your variety in terms of the types of companies that you've worked for on market research, how has that variety helped shaped how you think about market research?
Well, a lot of the things that you do in marketing research can apply regardless of what industry you're in. There are some specifics to different things going on, like you have to be sure whether customers are going to talk in depth, which with United Airlines, they definitely will. And with Discover Card and Synchrony, they definitely won't. And you have to adjust really to the consumer, which is really the biggest insight uh, hint or word of advice that I could give to anybody going through the industry is really it's all about getting the consumer to talk to you and what a lot of it there are things you want to talk about, but you also have to keep in mind that there's a lot that they want to talk about, and finding a way to do that balance and get the objectives and the answers you're looking for or the answers to the questions you have is really the key to the whole industry.
Yeah, I like that. You're right. It's when you talk about really personal things like finance, it's a little bit harder, but I feel like you learn how to glean insights better that you can apply to a variety of industries.
Yeah, and that's the key across any industry you're working in. There are a lot of people I know who've been lifers in CPG, and they'll ask me, "How did you make that switch? Was it so hard?" And the reality is, if you know your basics and if you're always wanting to find out more, be curious about what people are doing or figuring out their next step, you're going to succeed wherever you're at. And the transitions won't be as hard as you might think they would be.
Yeah, me being so I've never been on the client side. I've always been on the agency side, and that is the thing that I love about being on the agency side of things is being able to jump from finance to CPG. Like it's interesting. It's interesting how the insights are different, but like you mentioned, that core um, understanding of marketing research is the same. And I mean, for me, and I think you agree with this. It's all about curiosity. You have to be curious about
Yeah.
why are people doing what they're doing, right?
Absolutely. And you also can't just rely on what you learned about them like 3 and 4 years ago. There's a lot of times in my career where we've rerun research a couple of years later, and the results came back at least enough different that it was worth the money spent. Relying on, we've always done it this way, or some of those corporate myths that are there is the surest way to create research that's not going to work. You almost have to assume you've never done it before when you get started. And it's the same regardless of the industry, because whether it's changes in laws, whether it's changes in somebody marketing things differently, whatever it might be, the world's always changing, and consumers, where you think they are today is not where they're going to be next week.
And that's a great segue to my next question. We talked a little bit. You've expressed a keen interest in, like you said, not just understanding how consumers think today, but where they're headed in the future. What are some methods or technologies that you find most effective in gaining the forward thinking insights?
Well, the big thing is looking at the different consumer trends that are out there and going back, in my opinion, like a year or two to see how those trends have evolved. So if you think in terms of the biggest change in trends we saw, which was COVID, some of the things that were starting to happen got a boost. No pun intended as far as the shots go, because of COVID. And you think it now in terms of some of the things that you see more with, whether it's picking up grocery, curbside, or that you're doing a little bit less of handling of money or different things like that. A lot of that it got pushed forward because of COVID, but there were underlying trends already about consumers wanting things to be simpler and simpler and simpler that led to that, where you can save them time or thought on a lot of things without confusing. Really, it was the underlying thing that led to some of those things. Yes, there were restrictions and things that were part of it that made that happen. But if it had only been the restrictions, then they would have gone away after a lot of the restrictions were with COVID, and they haven't. And all you have to do is think about the next time that you get Uber Eats or whatever else. Those are all trends that were kind of there that got a push. And if you had kind of been looking at some of the trends that were going on, and I'm not saying I was predicting those things to happen, but a lot of what has happened can give you kind of the way the consumers are thinking and where they're headed to next. So it's not just looking at what the concern or current trend is, it's having some thoughts towards what led to that. And have those things changed? Has there been a big disruption in the industry? And a lot of this, I know, sounds a lot like Google search and things like that, but that is a big piece of what's going on. And if you think in terms of what are the next steps, is there something that was happening before that might move forward that was either abandoned, sort of like you think about some of the things with the eyeglasses and stuff to tell you where you're at that was talked about a few years ago, and they're starting to make a trend back that there's some acceptance of that. And that's the kind of thing you kind of look at is how do I combine the current trends and maybe some things that were in the recent past to see where the next step might be going.
Yeah, I think what really resonated with your answer there was everything we saw happen during the pandemic was already happening before, it just accelerated. And if we look at online groceries, um, online financial transactions, online shopping. I think a way to predict that is like, what is that underlying thread? And you said it was convenience,
Yeah.
and that's true, right? Like I had seen prior to the pandemic, I saw a futurist talk about the future of the home, and it was cool. It was like a PDF sketch drawing of what are some things in houses that are not there now that will be in the future. And I remember this was like 2019, right before the pandemic. One of the things I saw was like, oh, that's really cool. It was on the front door. It looked like a doggy door.
Hmm.
It was an Amazon package door. So
Wow.
it was like, you know, imagine like like a little door next to the door where an Amazon delivery driver would open and put the package in. And I was like, man, that's so smart and that's so true, right? And then
Yeah.
flash forward a couple months, the pandemic happened. That was starting to be a thing. It wasn't the door, but people started to get these little boxes. I don't know if you remember, right? Like
Yeah.
where the Amazon person would put that in. And it's
Yeah.
like they predicted that. And it wasn't that they predicted the pandemic. It's like they were talking about convenience and we're going to shop more. And I also seen new houses now. Um, and this is rare, but like a little fridge for same idea instead of package it one for groceries that you could actually put a little fridge there that, you know, like if you're at work and you're not going to pick up your groceries till later, it will stay cool till you get home.
Yeah, and a lot of the things you think about that, there are refrigerators out there that create your shopping list and could send it to the grocery store so that you either have curbside or, to your point with the refrigerator box here, have it so that someone through Uber Eats delivers it to that box for you. You
Oh
could,
yeah.
it almost becomes a situation of, at what point do you just touch the button, for lack of a better way of putting it right now, on the fridge, and it sends out that message and the groceries will show up sometime in the next couple hours, while you're out doing something else or whatever. And that's, you think in terms of adding AI to that piece, with it predicting when you're going to run out of different things and sending you an alert saying, okay, this is the time you normally are buying eggs or bread or whatever else each week. Should I place the order for you? So it's even going to go on that next step with, how do you tie in some of the things to make things simpler? And if you're getting an alert from AI just telling you, you know, based on the weight in your fridge with different spots, if you've got things going, or just based on ordering patterns you already establish, here's something you might consider.
It's true, right? Like, I mean, you're in marketing research. Our patterns don't change that much. Like, we do research to see when the patterns change, like you mentioned, right? You know,
Mhm.
you did some research. It changes enough where we're like, okay, we got to adjust here. But yeah, AI could definitely help us with that, and we could. Well, I mean, I'm curious, what's your thought on AI and research since you threw it out there? Like, does it help? Does it hurt? Are you using it? What's your take?
Well, my take is that there's a couple of things where it's going to help. And I know it just said a little while ago about, you got to rerun research 3 and 4 years, but for larger departments and things like that, there might be a way to use AI to help you with actually designing the next project based on the results you had from the previous projects. I also believe one of the things that will help will be smarter probes. Um, we all have the question, on the NPS question. Let's just take that. You know, how likely are you to recommend? And then for myself, the next question I ask is why. Well, that's great to ask that as a follow up, but if you had an AI based answer or question, you could take pieces of what they said as far as the why and maybe design the questionnaire to be on the fly to ask questions based off of what they said in that why. I know enough people probably think when they get the why and then they say something along the lines of, the delivery was terrible. And then the next question is something along the lines of, what do you think of our product? Well, I just told you it was a terrible delivery. Why don't you ask me about that first? And I think that one of the things that AI will be able to do is help us with, for lack of a better way of putting it, reshuffle the questions to really be the flow that's kind of similar to focus groups, where you're really taking it to that next level of a conversation. Um, One of the things that'll be interesting, because I also think that it could lead to a situation of maybe your tracking studies don't have as much information because it goes too far in asking about specific things you talked about. So there's going to be some of that having to guard against those kinds of things. But kind of like I said earlier, consumers really want to tell you what's going on, and sometimes you're just not asking the things they want to talk about. And I think with an AI setup for open ends, there's the potential to be kind of the best of both worlds. The things you want to know, but the things that really are going to lead to breakthroughs, which is hearing your consumers better.
I, I really like your perspective. It's unique because I haven't heard that before. Because right now the conversation in my industry, which is sample, it's like all or nothing. People are like,
Mhm.
synthetic sample, we don't need respondents anymore. And then, the panel companies are like, no, you'll always need respondents. But you're centering the respondent. You're saying, no, we need the respondent. Let's just optimize it, right? Let's ask the questions, one that they're interested in based on the open ends, and we could serve that. But it will also just lead to better research. I like your analogy to moderators and focus groups. Like AI will just lead us to richer quantitative research.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of work with online communities, and there's a lot there that I think is really kind of doing some of that work that might be coming out of AI going forward. Not on the fly because it's dependent on who the people are that are running the community, but a lot of questions that you ask or that the respondent asks really make the conversation better and the data richer. I ran one at United Airlines where a lot of people wanted to talk about their different experiences and a lot of things that happened. And we got a lot better types of information because of that feedback loop or having them start the conversations on whatever topic they wanted to talk about. There were areas that we got into that we kind of thought maybe needed some work and then found out, oh, maybe yes, maybe no, depending on where people took things. But the thing is, in communities and in that one on one kind of conversation that an AI could create, people aren't going to waste their time telling you stuff they don't care about. Yes, you can get your answers on what you need to know, but when they start talking about their stuff, um, if they had a okay flight, they're not going to talk about that. If they had a problem at baggage claim, they'll talk about that, and then often they'll give you ideas, and a lot of the times the ideas aren't really the best or anything like that, but you never know what's going to happen because it could trip something else within what they've said that you're like, well, they talked about baggage, but the reality is there's other places that impacts within the experience that maybe we need to look at closer that could make that part of the experience better from the consumer's point of view.
I want to double click on market research communities. I know we had a conversation. You're a fan of them. We've run some before. We at one point, I mean, I think market research communities were hot like 5, 10 years ago. It was like
Hmm.
everything's moving to market research online communities. It's quieted down now. I think it's just another tool in the toolbox, which is great. Um, but can you tell for our listeners, one, what is a market research online community? Two, why are you a proponent of them?
Well, as far as the community goes, it's a group of people. Now, and I'm saying people because you got to define how you want to look at it. So, one of the ones I worked on was our best customers. One of the ones I worked on was for uh, new product development. Another one was more of a standing group of people to ask questions that was a cross section of our business. It really depends on what you're trying to learn from the groups or what your most important segments are. And for me, the power that we have with communities is a couple of things from my point of view, as far as for the businesses I've worked on, we had specific things that were very difficult to ask about. So one of my favorite examples was at United was about how do you fix baggage claim, and the answer came back: fix the boarding process. And personally, I don't see how you could have come up with a survey that would have done that or any kind of process if you didn't let people do their own talking. And there are different topics, different things that you learn about that you can't learn in any other way, either because it at first glance it doesn't make sense to put the things together. But if you look at some of the things that people go through and where they talk about different things, you can get to that if you leave more of that qualitative look to it. Now, from the customer side, this is where I think the real power is. And again, it goes back to they're not going to waste their time talking about stuff that doesn't matter. You will get different information, whether it's on the product development side that we just needed to rethink a couple of things when they tried to actually use the product. And it really comes down to if you've got people who really want to talk and you're in an industry that want to talk, there is so much that the consumer wants to tell you. Your best customers are generally going to be pretty happy. Well, if you do one on ones that are a little bit less happy, you'll learn what's driving them towards thinking about something else. And when you know what you need to fix, and most times you do, but you may not know all the subtleties. You may not know some new trend that happened that's part of it. And communities to me are really that I just used your product, this worked. I used your product, did you think of doing this kind of mentality? And consumers want to be more and more part of the process to get the product that they want to make their, and back to simplicity, because I think this ties into simplicity, is to make their lives easier. And they're going to tell you about the things that they think would help. You may already know, but you also have a situation where it's a wealth of ideas that you may want to go and pursue with other research.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think one of the key takeaways from me and what you said was in the beginning, defining the purpose of the community. Either your best customers or this community is dedicated to new product or it's a cross section that you ask questions. We here at Think Now, we've run really successful communities, and we've run communities that we spent so much time and money and the customer never used them.
Hmm.
And I think the key differentiator was coming in, the client had a clear aspect of what the community was for or not. Because we've sold some communities where the brand or the company just felt like, hey, communities are popular. We need one.
Hmm.
And there was no plan to utilize it. And that's so frustrating because, it's a lot of time and work and money to get a community standing. And there's no plan to utilize them. But I think defining in the front end, what is this community going to be used for, is so critical.
Well, and there are two other key pieces I would say with communities. The first is having a clear vision that you can share internally about what you're going to learn about and how different groups can benefit from it. Uh, you may not have all the ideas worked out on you're gonna do and everything else. Which, if you did at the beginning, I'd be shocked. Because the other part too is they'll take you places that you never thought you'd go on top of it as far as what they want to talk about. But if you have the internal commitment and you can show people where there may be some benefit to their area with what you're doing, that's great. That really puts you a step ahead. The second thing is you got to keep it interesting for the participants. With United, it was a lot easier because there were so many things that people want to know about the industry. Um, with uh, the ones that I've run in other places, we've had to have more of the did you watch the Oscars or those kinds of things so that they developed kind of friendships within the community that made them want to stay. And that's the thing is that if it's not interesting, they're going to leave and you're going to waste a lot of money.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you think about it, like one of the things that I would say is we spent a lot of money on the communities that we did. Um, but if you think of it in terms of, I got a research project a week done, not too many other places you're going to get roughly 50 projects done at the kind of, if you go with an average cost that you're going to get there. And I would argue that they're also going to be a little bit stronger because of the fact that you're going to be building on some of the consumer ideas as well.
Yeah. No, no, very, very good points. Um, and timely conversation because we're about to launch a community, so it's good to know. Um, one of my favorite takeaways in one of our conversations is you likened your work to you being Sherlock Holmes of consumer insights. How do you approach solving the mysteries of consumer behavior? And can you share an example when your investigative approach led to a significant discovery?
Well, it starts with understanding the basics about your business, and and again, the audience is the key within what you're trying to do. But for me, a lot of what I try to do is stay on top of not only the trends as far as consumers in general, but what's going on in our industry, and looking at those different things as the starting point for any project. Now, there are probably some people thinking like, well, I'm doing ad testing, or I'm doing some kind of you know product development, and these things are very different. And how does the consumer part play in? It's all about understanding more about how people think. And that's where the whole part about trying to figure out consumers and how they're going about things, whether it's trends, whether it's what advertising is going to work best and resonate with people, whether it's just thinking in terms of how to make, a better credit card or whatever it might be, and what promotions are going to work. It applies not just to customer insights, but it applies to business analytics as well. You really are at your best as a marketer and a researcher by really understanding and seeing just where our consumers at today. What are they thinking about? And looking at where the trends are and that stuff. How does that apply to my business? So I think about some of the stuff with back in the day at Pillsbury. A lot of the things working on was, how did the promotions work? Why did they work? And looking into different things about understanding, okay, if it worked, will it work again? Because consumers also like new, and you think about all the different flavors that are out there of different things and that stuff. And you go back 15 years ago, you didn't have nearly as many choices, and you go even back another 15 and you had a lot less then too. And really, it's just trying to go with the ebbs and flows of how people are thinking and how things are done. And you want to be at the head of that next trend if you can be there. And not being satisfied with where you're at today is really the thing. That's kind of how I approach it. And I know we've talked also about the Wayne Gretzky quote about being where the puck's going to be. That's where my thinking is hey, if I know where you're at today and I try to get to where you're at today, tomorrow I'm still behind. And that's kind of where my thinking is there's all kinds of different examples of businesses that led their industries, and then there was a new innovation by somebody smaller, and suddenly they're not relevant. And that's the thing you got to do is you got to find a way to keep looking for where are people going next, because they're not going to tell you right off you got to do it.
Yeah, so I want to double click on that. What, like, we talked a little bit about what happened during the pandemic, um, certain consumers trends accelerating. I think that's still happening now, right? I mean, I think now we've fully embraced this online shopping, online grocery convenience. I mean, 4 years, which is it's kind of crazy to think about. 4 years is a long time. The pandemic feels like yesterday. Um, but what are some trends that you're seeing today? Like, where do you think the puck is going now from a consumer perspective? What can we expect as researchers in the next 2 to 5 years, let's say?
Well, the one that I'm always trying to fight is that dropping of response rates. So that one's kind of there all the time. But as far as where consumers themselves are heading, I think that the trend of writing out simplicity is still ongoing. And that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of talk about AI. There's a lot of fear about AI too. And I don't want to make it sound like it's all going to be smooth and everything else, because we're coming, in my opinion, we're coming to a crossroads where it's going to be which is going to win out, simplicity or security. And there's the security piece is a big piece of what's going on. And the more you hear about things, just like with the IT shutdown that happened on Friday that impacted Microsoft around the globe and things like that, we're all more interconnected, but it's also more that that kind of thing can happen without the right protections. And a lot of people are concerned about that. So to me, those are the two main ones that are going to be out there that are going to be competing. And finding a way to make sure that you are secure, that your answers to the surveys and things like that are anonymous, that you're being taken care of, but that I can do it in a way that's so easy for you that you don't have to worry about it. But you're aware of it. That's because that's one of the things we hear from time to time is some of the things with your data being sold with whatever app you sign up for and things like that. Um, there's a lot of things that are going on that people aren't as aware of that I think are going to come out, make people more aware of that, whether um, the companies like it or not. And then it's going to become a security thing that has to be part of the piece as well. Those, to me, those are the two main ones that are going to be going forward. Um, I also think there's a lot of things that we're talking about as far as being able to hopefully bring people together more than what's been happening with some of the things lately. Um, that's one I'm hoping will happen. I don't know that I have the information to say one way or another on that. Um, so those are kind of the two that I'm pretty sure going to happen, and the third one that I'm kind of watching and hoping for signs on that.
Yeah, I was thinking about this whole security thing that happened. I believe was it was it Wednesday? I think it was
It was Friday.
Wednesday. Was it
It was on
Friday?
Friday. Yeah.
Okay, because yeah, maybe yeah, it was Friday. I think so. We have offices in Mexico. I'm in LA, so I drove and I missed it by a day, thankfully, because the border was completely shut down because
Mm.
that's how they. So you can imagine it's already long to cross the border via car. Um, but it got me thinking. One, I'm lucky that I didn't get stuck over there coming home. But two, to your point, simplicity and security. I think we forget, for simplicity, how much we give up in security. And this was a small crash relatively, but you
Mm-hmm.
had airplanes, borders, financial institutions shut down. So it's just something to think about. Like the more simplicity we give into, you are giving up security and also stability. I mean, I, it, I'm not to sound negative, but this is a glimpse of things to come. There's going to be bigger shutdowns than this that we have to think about as a society from a consumer perspective.
Yeah. But we also can do a lot of things to make sure that that simplicity is done the right way and keeping consumers informed.
Yeah,
Um, a lot of people want to talk about, or in the past, have talked about the small print with a lot of your credit cards and things like that. Um, if there's ways to make sure that the people are aware of the different things that are happening while they're doing things, that's going to be an important thing, I think, going forward.
agreed. And I want to put end with some optimism. You talked about people, coming together. There are some signs of that. There's right. I think one of the trends I'm glad, or one of the predictions that I'm glad didn't come to pass during the pandemic. I think tech companies put a big bet that we're always going to be inside and everything's going to be internet and we're not going to connect in person. The opposite happened. Unfortunately, lots of tech layoffs happened subsequently because humans have an innate need to connect, right? But one of the trends I like that are seeing now is like run clubs. I don't know if you've seen that, but run clubs are making a big resurgence, and I feel like that's one thing that is going to continue to happen. Like humans we want to be outside and we want to connect with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with where I am, I've been seeing bike clubs a lot at nights, riding around in the neighborhood, or even like if I'm going further away for something overnight or whatever. It seems like
Yeah,
I run into a group of cyclists together, it stopped somewhere and just talking about different things and that's a great thing to see.
yeah, and I think we're seeing more companies and brands recognize that and provide spaces and experiences for people to connect. I think that's a great trend for companies to be tapped into, like sponsoring events, run clubs, bike clubs, things like that. I think that's another trend that's a positive one.
Yeah, and like you said about experiences, I thought before we got to the pandemic, experiences were really the big thing that were moving along, and it kind of got derailed with COVID. But it's also one now that you mentioned, I think also is going to have an upswing. It's just a matter of when.
Well, believe it or not, we're at our time. I really enjoyed our conversation. This was awesome. If people want to connect with you online, Dan, what's the best way to find you?
LinkedIn's always the easy one.
Okay, awesome, Dan. Thanks again. Thank you everybody for listening, and tune in for our next time. Thanks to everyone listening in. To get more multicultural insights, check us out at thinknow.com and follow us on social media. You can also subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform.